Hello, everybody. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to this instalment of Changemakers Bite Size, brought to you by SA Partners. Today, I'm delighted to introduce you to the host for today's session, Andy Brunskill. Andy's a partner here at SA Partners, our TPM lead consultant, and co-author of the Shingo Publication Award-winning book, TPM, A Foundation for Operational Excellence. Please do leave any questions in the comments section, and Andy will be able to answer at the end of the session. So without further ado, Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Jordan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's really, I feel very privileged to do this afternoon. As Jordan has said, this is called Do Better Things or Do Things Better. And it's just a little bit of a shallow dive into looking at changeover optimization. And I'm going to reference just two case studies in terms of where we've helped teams optimize their changeover process and achieve a 70% changeover optimization or changeover reduction. And that has been a key enabler to help drive and build capacity to bring in new business and avoid capital expenditure. So obviously changeover it's one of the 6 equipment-based losses, and it sits under an availability loss when we look at overall equipment effectiveness. And if you think about it, as an availability loss, it's one of those unavoidable losses. All the other 5 losses we'd love to actually eliminate, but we can't eliminate changeovers. Yeah, we can reduce them and we can do better things with the planning, but ultimately, as the business develops and with customers' demands in terms of wanting unique products and the number of SKUs that our companies have, there's always increasing. We always seem to be that we're going to be doing more and more SKUs and therefore more and more changeovers. And obviously, with the drive to reduce inventory, whenever I've done a changeover workshop, and I've been doing plenty of them over the last 30 plus years, one of the things I actually say to the team is I say, we're going to work on changeovers and we're going to work on optimizing the changeovers. And the reason we're going to do this is because you're probably going to end up doing more. So it's not about, yes, it's about elimination, it's about reduction of downtime as a result of changeovers, but it's actually an enabler, and it's an enabler to do better things. So we want to reduce our stock levels, especially if we're working in a fast-moving consumer goods environment where we have short shelf life product and it needs to be quicker, or even high value items where we have to reduce the cost of working capital. So the reference to OEE here is it's in our availability losses, and in most companies it's top, if not second, to breakdowns or minor stops. And depending on the type of environment, depending on the maturity and the TPM journey, this does vary. Again, I'll talk a little bit about OEE, but as I've already mentioned, changeover is one of the major losses, and there can be a number of reasons why we need to be able to reduce our changeover time or optimize our changeover time. It may be that we're shorting customers. It may be that we've got particular products that may be very, very awkward to run. And when we run them, we make sure we run them in large quantities, and we deliberately have supply shortages. It may be we just don't have the capacity. And it may be that we don't want to have to put additional shifts on. We don't want to have to work Saturdays and Sundays. And it may be that we're under cost pressure because we're spending a lot of time on changeovers, and our the units we're producing is suffering, because obviously when we're on a changeover, we're not making product. So, but the key thing here, and the key theme here, is that if I was asked the question, can we invest in a new line as an ops director of a company, my first question would be, well, where are we currently? where is our overall equipment effectiveness? And if we got an answer that said, well, we're at 50%, my challenge would then be, well, if we got to 70, would we have to invest in a new line? And obviously the answer would be, well, if the answer was no, we wouldn't. So there's our challenge. So what are we doing in order to achieve that? And what are we doing to increase our productive capacity? So I could talk a little bit about productive capacity, but just for the novices, and I should make no assumptions. So just a little bit about this. This philosophy of changeover optimization, or as Mr. Shingo called it, it was known as single minute exchange of dies, because it was first applied in Toyota, where they shortened the changeover of 1,000-ton stamping presses from 4 hours to 3 minutes, hence single minute exchange of die. I don't call it SMED, but I respect that that is where it came from. And I do tend to talk and call it changeover optimization, because even if you call it changeover reduction, that's not necessarily something that goes down particularly well. And in some in some industry, the quality or the right first time rate is worth far more than the downtime associated with the changeover. So, you know, again, definition, changeover, last good part off at optimum rate to first good part off at optimum rate. And one of your drivers in your business may be yield. So the focus has to be has to be understood. I'm not going to get into too much on this, but again, just a reminder, you know, many years ago, you know, as a younger production manager, I may just stick my head out the office on the shop floor and say, is that changeover done yet? And the answer would be, yeah, it's up, it's running. I'd see some units coming off. I think it's done. But actually, we need to understand that it's making sure we're back at optimum rate producing good product. And very often we can have a changeover and yet we're only running at 60-70% performance efficiency, on our scrap levels are not where they should be. Hence the focus is on these periods of rundown period, setup period, run-up period. And this is really important. And this is really important when we're scoping. And I've come over quite a lot of complex type of changeovers over the years, where we've already got concurrent activity that's happening in the process. We've got the phase A ends before phase B starts, and all of these types of scenarios. But fundamentally, we use the sort of the 4-step classic process that Mr. Shingo used, which is looking at our current process where we have a mixture of internals and externals. That's internals are things you can only do when the process is stopped. Externals are things you could do while the process was still running, that are mixed together. Splitting those by asking the very simple question of, through organizational things, could we actually make this internal step external by, for example, we'll have the tools ready at the equipment, as opposed to we have to stop the process and go and get the tools. And then we go through the conversion phase where we're converting our internal steps to external. And we're doing that basically through some technical type of improvement, heating, cooling, maybe elimination. And this is also a step that often is missed, that the conversion, I also put in there the elimination. If we can eliminate the phase altogether, fantastic. And then the 4th step of the phase, which is about streamlining. And the important thing here is we're streamlining the internals that we had left using things such as quick release. But we're also streamlining the externals that we've externalized. And again, that's about behaviors. It's about respect. It's about saying, well, the person who's doing the changeover, they still have to do it. And they have to do it, okay, they can do it after the changeover has been completed or before as a preparation activity, but we still need to make those slicker. And typically, using this 4-step process, we know we can achieve 70% plus reduction in our changeover process. The other thing I just wanted to also sort of include this afternoon was a reference to this best of best concept, which was introduced to me by my dear late great friend Peter Wilmot. And this is basically looking inside your overall equipment effectiveness figures over a period of time, typically 4 weeks, but you can do it up to 6 months, and looking at the best availability, the best performance, and the best quality rate, and then actually calculating those together to come up with what we call a best of best OEE figure. You can do this with changeovers as well. You can you can create your changeover matrix, you can look at all of the different scenarios, and then you can look at your data and say, what was the best we ever did changing that? And what that's actually telling you is it's been done before. It's been done before. Our problem, like the OEE best of best, is the fact we've not been able to standardize it and we've not been able to sustain it. But, you know, the interesting thing here is best of best. The difference between a 70% OEE average and an 84 is 14 percentage points. 14 percentage points of 70% is 20% improvement in productive capacity. And 14 percentage points is not far off the sort of end tail benefit you would get from a significant changeover optimization process. Of course, based on the fact that you're measuring overall equipment effectiveness correctly and you're including all changeover loss as a loss. Although I did say before, it is actually an unavoidable loss. But, you know, 20% real improvement in productive capacity. I'm just going to change tack slightly and say concept changeover. How do we sort of get it into people's minds? And the example I'll use very quickly is low-cost airlines. So, you know, here's an example of a flight that I've been doing certainly a hell of a lot this year, but I'm very familiar with. The flight from Dublin to Liverpool Airport takes roughly about 45 minutes. And a turnaround, if we're honest, you know, probably takes about 40 minutes. And yet you can see there's a little bit of a sort of a chart in the air, on the ground, in the air. If we reduce that turnaround time to 25 minutes, look what it does for us, okay? It means we create capacity and we can give that, and we can utilize that capacity with additional flight time and extra flight, which means more revenue, okay? And greater customer choice. So taking that concept of quick turnarounds, let's just have a very brief look at some of the things that happen. You know, I'm sure we've all noticed that the litter is collected from us before we're landing. There are no pockets in the seats to store and stash rubbish, and that reduces the cleaning time. Passengers boarding the plane, the queuing up, the ready, the being processed to speed up the boarding process. We've got good visual management so that we know that we're getting our customers to the right place. We've got the plane has not yet arrived, and yet we've externalized the activity, and we've got luggage ready to be loaded onto the plane ready. And we've got all of our service vehicles in place. We've got our confirmation of the safety process. Obviously, safety, we can't cut any corners in certainly this process and all our processes. We've got visual management, and, you know, we've got our safety briefing that's actually taking place as the plane is taxiing. And I'm going to share with you just a quick video. Hopefully you'll all be able to hear the sound, but this is a great example of, and we talked about doing things better or doing better things. So here's an example of real innovation in our process of speeding up changeovers in the aviation industry.
Airbus files patent for removable cabin modules. French airmaker Airbus has come up with a new way to shave off time between flights. The patent designs the company released detail removable cabin modules, which could be swapped in and out of an aircraft to reduce turnaround time between flights. Airbus's concept for removable cabin modules would have passengers board a detached cabin from a docking station in anticipation of a plane's arrival. Passengers seat themselves while their luggage is stored, reducing processing time for boarding. Once the empty aircraft arrives in the terminal, the fully loaded cabin container would be lowered into the plane, locking into place before the plane departs. Once the flight lands at its destination, it pulls into a new gate at the airport, where the removable cabin would detach and be lifted up into a docking station. The plane would then be prepared to take on a new cabin of passenger.
Okay. So just sort of now transferring that to how can we take this into businesses, and we can take the concept of changeover into service industry, but I am going to focus on factory environment. So I'm just going to use two examples, and one is from a food company who is packing fresh veg into using vertical form, fill and seal machines and multi-head weighers in order to get different types of vegetable into a multi-pack. Okay, so one of the first things in terms of, and can I just say that this is part of a wider intervention. So we've already established understanding of strategy, problem solving, identifying waste through value stream mapping type processes. And this starts with using a simulation. These pictures you'll see are of a simulation that we use within the business, and they go through a learning process, and it's a learning and doing process. So they're changing a simulation over, they're going from a diamond shape to a circle shape, you can see there, and they're recording all the observations, and they're making notes of potential opportunities. I'll cut to the chase. This is them in the final round where they have analysed the process using the 4-step process. They've come up with a new process. They've come up with improvements, and there's lots of different things you can see there, quick release, locating pins, all that sorts of things. And then they implemented the changeover, and they've done it considerably quicker than they would have done it in round one. And I won't give you the figures just in case anyone would be interested in a similar simulation for their business. But then we're taking the learning almost immediately, and then we're doing it and applying it to their process. So we're looking at, based on some analysis, looking at the frequency and the different types of changeover, looking at the one that's effectively going to give us the biggest gain in terms of downtime elimination. So we then go through the whole process using the chart that you see on the wall there with the team, having videoed and analysed, done some spaghetti diagrams. And this again, one is where we already had 2 operators working concurrently, so we had to do a number of these to track the movements of both operators and the equipment. And we've gone through the whole process, looking at the ideas and then coming up with potential opportunities. And here we've just got the live chart that they're using on the wall. This is the chart that I showed you before. It's very dynamic. We put the elements, we put the time, we look at what's currently internal, what's external, and we can move it, and then we can come up with the opportunities, and we go to streamlining, and we ultimately at the bottom there can create our new standard process with a new time. Here's just some examples of the sorts of changes, not all of them. These are just some of them. So we're talking about methods for the ceiling head of storage, the cages for storing the film to make sure that we have the right film storage, and that we're also complying with line clearance procedures. Single point lessons related to the printer matrix setup, component storage, just some of those features there. And then this is really important, is that when we're designing the new changeover, we are creating standard work, and we're actually creating it for the existing changeover. And this is just an example here where we've got each of the elements that are involved in the changeover, and then we've got the whether the task is manual or auto, and we're showing the cycle time or the process time for each of those steps, and then we're looking at the concurrent working. We're looking at operator A, operator B. Then we get into our planning phase in terms of having identified our current state, having identified our future state, how are we now going to actually plan this over a period of time? This is a real plan just with line X and the process that we're following. And here again is just some more examples of the changeover chart, and again the use of spaghetti diagrams to look at operator motion. And this again, as I mentioned before, you've got upstairs on the multi-head weighers, and then you've got downstairs on the vertical form fill. And this is an example of the standard work. So the standard of this particular changeover was 35 minutes, and this standard changeover time is now 9 minutes. That's a significant reduction in that time. And the sustainability of this process is really important, because this was a specific line, but there are a number of generic and therefore similar lines. But the pilot was on this specific line. And the important thing was to make sure that we got the right cadence and we got the right standards. And this standard work can actually sit outside of the cell and could be used by the team leader to monitor that people are actually following the standard work in the correct sequence at the right time, and that things have to be done in that sequence. Here's another example from another business, which is basically packing a type of vegetables into plastic bags. But within there, we've got a grading process to remove poor product and grade to the correct customer specification. As you can see here, this changeover with a number of different pieces of equipment was a 50-minute changeover and was identified to a opportunity for a 10-minute changeover. So again, significant reduction from 50 minutes to 10 minutes. Here's some real life data from the first example of the vertical form fill, where we've got the total changeover. So because as I mentioned before, this was a generic changeover and then it was rolled out to all of the lines. This is the total changeover time duration in minutes. And as you can see, that's a significant reduction in the changeover time. And the chart there will also say, yeah, we've got an average changeover. Yeah, okay, it's dropped slightly, but that's because we're also looking at changeover sequencing and saying, what can we do without even looking at the changeover, and what can we do in terms of some of the decisions we make in the planning process, which I'll talk a little bit about in a minute. So just in terms of what we've spoken about over the last sort of 20, 23 minutes, there's three things that you can do today. The first thing that you can be thinking about is the best of best philosophy, okay? And I'll go back to the best of best philosophy just as a reminder. So our best of best philosophy, which we looked at before, was we use this for OEE. You can use it for OEE, looking back across the availability, the performance, and the quality over a period of time, and identifying the best performance that we had in availability, the best performance, the best quality, and then calculating the average and then the difference between best of best and average and turning that into productive hours gain. You can also do this for changeovers. So again, based on data collection, tracking the changeovers, looking back at the types of changeovers, and then identifying the longest and the shortest. And that comes back to another point. We always ask when it's bad, why so bad? But we don't tend to ask when it's good, why so good? So identify the good ones and ask why. And I'll guarantee it'll be because we actually had an additional person, or we did this slightly different. We had the preparation correct. The settings went in first time. But those features of why so good will be part of the opportunity in order to improve your changeover process going forward. Another thing that would be useful as a result of this webinar this afternoon would be ask why there is variation. Okay, so having looked at the variation, try and understand what are the reasons for the variation. And then the other thing, which I think would be really helpful, is we've spoken, or rather I've spoken this afternoon, all about the opportunities of looking at eliminating the 6 equipment-based losses and predominantly changeover loss. But lots and lots of progress can be made without even having a look at the changeover process itself, and looking at the profile of SKUs, looking at the planning process, and what I call the management losses that cause unnecessary changeovers. And I've done this with quite a lot of businesses, or rather we've done this with quite a lot of businesses, where just by looking at the sequence of running orders, looking at every part, looking at the breakdown of runners, repeaters, and strangers, there's some significant losses as a result of poor planning. And that poor planning may be as a result of supply chain issues. It may be as a result of last minute customer requests, but there is a huge amount of opportunity by analysing these management losses that sit outside. And I'll just go back to one of the very first slides that I showed as we finish, that sit outside of this, which is our loss analysis. So we've got our 6 classic losses, and we've got our management losses, and we've got our supply chain losses. So we're changing plans, we're doing more changeovers as a result of an ineffective supply chain, or as a result of management losses. It could be skills, it could be absence, it could be all sorts of things. It could be running out of glue because that's something the supervisor's supposed to do, and we can't do that product because we've run out of glue, but we can do this one because that'll give us a couple of days before the glue comes in. So there's 3 things to have a think about. I hope this has been useful for you, and I think that's me done. Thanks, Jordan.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Andy, for your session today, and excited to see you again in a couple of weeks for your second bite-sized session when that comes up. Just a reminder to everybody that all of our bite-sized sessions are available on our website at sapartners.com over on the resources page. And that next week our session will be hosted by Dr. Brian Cutcliffe around creating a learning organization. And I'll put the link to register for that one in the comments as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, Andy, thank you so much for your time today, and hope you all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.